It's fun to be together today. We recognize seniors both campuses, and so it was fun to do that and remember that our church raises kids up, and that's one of the major things that we do as a church, and then sends them off, and it's just a cool thing. It is great to be. We're kind of between series, so we're going to start a new series next week, and we'll invite everybody out. So it's going to be a wonderful week as we bless kids going back to school, backpacks. I don't know if you know this, but summer's over. You can get out your fall clothes now. It is officially, that's happened. School starts, man. We are on. Pull those sweaters out. It's time. School starts this week, and so we're going to be praying for our kids and our teachers and just blessing them. And next week is such a fun week as we do that together, and so I want you to be a part of that and invite friends and neighbors. We have a little cue sheet that tells us what happens at what point in the service, and on all the cue sheets this morning it said there was going to be a senior moment, and we weren't sure exactly. Different people interpret that different ways, but it was anyhow. It's good to have a senior moment together with you. Because we're in between series, I want to take just this week and remind us who we are as the church, and that's what we're going to look at together. We're going to look at a story in John chapter 4, one of the most awkward conversations Jesus ever had, and we're going to do that together. Let me pray for us, and then we're going to dive into Scripture. God, we give you thanks that you know us. In fact, your word was given to us 2,000 years ago. These words were written down, but they were for us. So today, as we gather around them, would you make them clear to us? Help us to hear them and understand them. And most importantly, God, we want to be a people of your word that lives out your word, that makes our decisions and places our priorities based on your word. So help us to do that, God. We pray this in your name. Amen. Well, I don't know how you are about awkward conversations. Some of you have awkward conversations pretty much all the time. It's pretty much every conversation you have feels awkward. And others, you've never had awkward conversation in your life. Every conversation is wonderful, easygoing, that's fine. And you may fall in one of those two camps. Most conversations feel a little awkward to me, especially when I'm not quite sure of, if I'm meeting somebody new or something like that. But Cammie and I, my wife and I, go to the grocery store, and we have totally different strategies when we get to the grocery store, right? My goal in the grocery store is in and out fast as possible. That's just the whole thing. I want the least interactions I could possibly, do. I'm going to grab my one item, because that's pretty much all I'm getting at the grocery store, one item or maybe two, and I am going to go to the, no talk checkout if I can, the beep, and move on if I can do that. Or I strategize and I look around and I pick out what I'm looking for. If I've got one item, is somebody that looks real friendly, that has a huge amount of items, right? Because if I go up to right behind them and they look real friendly and they've got a ton and I've only got one, they're going to be like, you can go ahead, right? And that's the goal. I'm just getting in and out. And so I'm definitely on the lookout for people with coupons, or if you're writing a check, I do not want to be in your line, And so but my wife, the totally opposite. She looks at all the lines and she says, that's a great group of people to hang out with for a little while, I'm just going to go stand over there and talk with them. And they just have a nice conversation, and we'll get done. And she'll tell me all about their dogs and the family, what's happening in the family, all the things. And I look at her like, I think we have different goals going to the grocery store. I didn't know it was about meeting new people. Some of you love it. Others of us, it feels a little bit awkward. Jesus leaned in even when it was awkward. Watch this. Let's go together to John chapter 4. We're going to read quite a bit of scripture today as we walk through this in John chapter 4. And we'll start in verse 3. And he's with his disciples here, and this is what it says, verse 3. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given his son Joseph. Now, I'm going to pause for a second so you get a little bit of what's happening here. If you were looking at a map of Israel, Jesus grew up and lived most of his life up here in Galilee. That's up sort of towards the top. But he did a lot of ministry down here in this area of Judea. Judea is where Jerusalem is. It's the region where Jerusalem is. So, but in between is this area called Samaria. Samaria was filled with the Samaritan people. And the Samaritan people had been Jewish. However, generations and generations back, the Assyrians came in and they took over Israel and they kind of wiped it out. And they wiped out all the people and people were sent into exile. But this group of folks said, you know what? We're going to compromise with the Assyrians. And so they changed their ways. They changed their worship. They intermarried. They built families with the Assyrians. And they compromised to the point where their worship was really a fully different worship. Well, eventually, as the Jewish people came back into the land, they looked at that group of Samaritans as the ultimate traitors. And from generation to generation, the Samaritans were just looked down upon. And the Samaritans didn't have good things to say about the Jewish people either. There was an unbelievable separation. In fact, so much so that when Jesus is telling a story about the Good Samaritan, he tells that story later about this guy that helps someone out on the side of the road. It's an illustration. If he tells a story about the Good Samaritan, they would have all looked at him if he said the words Good Samaritan and been like, there's no such thing as a Good Samaritan. Those two words just don't even go together. That's not a thing. They did not believe there were good Samaritans. So what would happen normally is when a group of people were walking from Jerusalem, remember they're walking all these things. So when they're walking from Jerusalem, maybe a couple days walk, they would have gone around Samaria to get to Galilee. They would not have gone through. So even though it was on the way, technically it was on the way, culturally, this was way out of the way. And I don't even know what the conversation would have been like, but the disciples were like, why are we going this way? We're not allowed to talk with those folks. We're not supposed to associate with them at all. We're definitely not to eat and drink with them. There are very strict food laws. We would not eat and drink with that group of people. And yet Jesus goes culturally out of the way to go through Samaria. So that's where we pick up. This is now verse 6. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, he sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone on into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For the Jews did not associate with the Samaritans. And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" And Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water, welling up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." This is just the beginning of a really interesting conversation. But I want you to see a couple things. You see, Jesus is teaching his disciples how to be on mission. He's teaching them what that looks like. And the first thing that he does is he takes them to this place that they probably shouldn't go. They should have gone around. It was not the convenient way. This was the hard way. They really weren't supposed to stop there and get water and get food, and they shouldn't have done all those things. And Jesus goes right into that. You see, Jesus is teaching them what it means to be disciples. And to be disciples is to then become the church. In fact, just a little bit later in the story, Jesus is he's gone through the cross and resurrection, and then he's going to commission these disciples. And as he goes back to be with the Father, he's going to give them the Holy Spirit, and he's going to commission them with their job. And the job of the disciples is then passed down from generation to generation, and that becomes us. That becomes our job, the job of the church. And when he gives them that mission, he says, this is what you're supposed to do. He says, go into all nations, baptizing people, right? Baptizing all people. teaching them to obey my commands. And I will be with you to the end of the age. This is called the Great Commission. And it really comes down to a few different parts. And I want you to see it. Because there's this real forward-leaning sense to that commission. That what it means to be the disciples, or what it means to be the church, means going through places like Samaria, like getting out of the comfort zone. There are a few parts to be on mission. The first is, he says, your job is to go and make disciples. That's the job of the church. That's what we do as a church. We make disciples. And then there are kind of three ways that he explains how we do that. One is we baptize. That's we invite people that are far from God, that don't have a relationship with God, to know God, to begin to have a relationship with him and become baptized. That's that initiation into the faith, to say, I'm baptized, I've given my life to Jesus as my Lord and Savior. That's baptism. That's reaching people that are far from God. Then he says, we teach them to obey all I've commanded. You teach them to live in the way of Christ and make our decisions in the way of Christ. And that's what we teach. And we try to grow disciples and teach each other. And we teach to have relationships that impact each other and point each other towards God. That's what we try to do. And then the third part of that is actually starts back at the beginning, where he says, go make disciples. Because he tells every one of these disciples, you all have a job. Every one of the disciples is a minister. And we talk about that as a church, that the church isn't just, just pastors aren't the ministers. No, everybody is a minister. Everybody gets a job. So we say that as a church, this is what we're to be about. We make disciples. And there are kind of three things that we do. We reach people that are far from God. We share the gospel with them. We invite them into a relationship with God. We reach people. And then we build. We build believers in our faith. We build disciples. And we build relationships with each other that lead to that. So we reach and we build. And the last thing that we do is we equip everybody to be a part of ministry. That's what we do as a church. We want everyone to figure out their gift and serve in their gift and be a part of ministry. So we want to reach and build and equip, and we do that as we go. Jesus, he leans into this. He's like, we're going to be a group that's on mission. We're going to go. And he takes his disciples with him. And they go. And why are they going? Why would they go up there? Because he's got something to give to this woman. And as we find out, as we read a little bit further down, it's not just her, but actually her whole town, that there's a deep longing that she has. She doesn't even know it. She doesn't know what that longing is. She's been trying to find all different kinds of ways to fill herself. And that longing is there. And Jesus has got something to give to her. He's going to talk to her a little bit about what it means, to be thirsty. But then he moves that a little bit further so she can start to understand what he's really talking about is a relationship with the living God. He can offer her a relationship with a God who loves her, who created the world, who wants to be in relationship with her. He offers her, he has something to offer to her that is life-changing. It's incredible. And because of that, he's willing to go. That's what we're called to as the church. We're called to reach people that are far from God in places that sometimes seem uncomfortable. Now here's the nuance of this. Jesus wants to teach these disciples that they have to be willing to make uncomfortable decisions for the sake of others. Now, I want you to pay attention to this story, right? You've heard this story. Some of you that have grown up around the church, you've heard this story a bunch of times. So it just kind of, just goes right over your head. You're like, yeah, I know that story. It's the woman at the well. Like, we get that. But pay attention to the story, right? Because Jesus goes up and he sits down at this well and he says, would you give me something to drink? And she says, why are you talking to me? And he keeps talking. Whenever someone says, why are you talking to me, I back out of the situation real quick, right? I am out, I am done. That conversation is over. Why are you even talking to me? I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything. I'm so very sorry. Jesus just leans in. He goes, could you give me something to drink? She goes, why are you talking to me? And he starts talking to her about the thirst that she has. And then she says, are you crazy? What are you talking about? Right? She goes, are you greater than our father Jacob who built this well, generation? Are you nuts? Jesus keeps talking. Think about how uncomfortable that conversation is. Some of you guys, every conversation feels like this. So you with me, you know. But others of you, you've not had an awkward conversation. You didn't know Jesus sometimes had awkward conversations. This one's awkward. He was breaking all kind of social norms. He wasn't to sit with her. There's a little note there to tell you that the disciples had gone off, so he was left alone with her. That was not normal. A Jewish man wouldn't interact with a woman in an individual setting unless it was family. That just wouldn't happen. And yet he speaks to her as a human. And he starts to talk with her and interact with her and ask her questions. And that's unusual. And then she's a Samaritan. They're not supposed to talk at all. They're definitely not supposed to share water. You wouldn't do that. And he has that, and it's awkward and it's uncomfortable. And in just a minute, we'll read. The disciples come back, and they're like, hey, what's going on? This is weird, right? That's kind of what they say. A little bit different language, but that's basically what they say. And they go, what in the world? Jesus was willing to make an uncomfortable decision for someone who wasn't there yet. Like he was paying attention. I just imagine that conversation he has with the disciples when they go, hey, we got to go back up to Galilee. And they go, well, we're going the normal way. And he goes, no, we're not going the normal way. We're going right through Samaria. And they're like, why are we going through Samaria? That doesn't make any sense. That's not the comfortable route. The comfortable thing would have been to kind of stay with the group and stay in the normal path and just talk to the group and be with the disciples and make that comfortable. And that would have been good. That's not like a bad thing. But Jesus says, no, we're on mission. And he goes, we're going through Samaria. And I don't think they even understood what decisions he was making, but he was making a decision for someone that was far from him, that wasn't in the room yet, that wasn't here in the circle, but he had to make the decision for that person. So he said, we're going. This is where we're going to go, because Jesus, he's 100% man, he's 100% God. He knew, and he knew her story, and he knew her need, and he knew that they had something to give that would change her life and change the community. And so they did the uncomfortable thing. I don't like uncomfortable things. Those are tricky, right? I like when things just go the same way. I like when my seat is my seat and nobody sits in my seat. You know what I'm saying? I want to show up at church. I want my seat right there. Not at this church, but I know stories of other. I have a story this the other day of a church where, somebody new came to visit and they got there a couple minutes early, and that was a fatal mistake, right? Because they sat down in a seat that was someone else's pew, And but you don't have to worry about that, because when that person got there and their pew was taken, they went ahead and told that new family they had to move. Just move on over. This is my seat. And the problem was solved because that new family never came back. They didn't have to worry about that, not one more time. Now, God calls us something different. He calls us to uncomfortable places for people that are far from him. And seats are just silly things, right? Like, okay, it's whatever. It's just sitting in a seat. But he even calls them to go sit at a well and have a conversation with a woman that she wasn't really even appreciative of, definitely not even welcoming at first. But he just kept sitting with her, he kept talking to her. Now let's listen to what happens, because he's interested in her. He's not just saying, hey, here's this gospel story that you need to know. He's actually talking to her about her life. He's interested in what's going on with her, and he makes a real connection with her. Let's listen to this. This is verse 15. The woman said, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here and drawing water. She's confused because, he's talking about water. And he told her, he's going to now point at what's really going on in her heart. And he told her, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. And Jesus said to her, you're right when you say that you have no husband. The fact is that you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place of worship must be in Jerusalem. Now, she's talking about the religious actions of the day, what you had to do to be religious in the day. And Jesus is going to move it from religious action to relationship. Watch this. He goes, woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. And the woman said, I know that the Messiah called Christ is coming, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us. And then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. This is a poignant moment in the scripture. Jesus is unveiled as not just a person, not just a prophet, but that he is truly God. And all of a sudden, she has this a realization. I might be able talking to the true God, right? And this idea that we have the opportunity to have a relationship with God. It's this unbelievable thing, and it all comes out in this moment. And then the disciples ruin everything, right? They just show up. Here's it says, verse 27. Just then, the disciples returned, and do they care? Are they going like, wow, you're having this deep conversation. You're really interested. This woman, life is changing. When they turn up, it says this. They returned and were surprised to find him talking to a woman. He should not have been doing that, right? That's what they were worried about. But no one asked, what do you want? Or why are you talking to her? They were thinking it though, right? But they didn't ask. And then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of the town and made their way toward him. That town is changed in this story. Jesus is teaching his disciples to be on mission. And so they go into the uncomfortable place. They have an uncomfortable conversation. This is about changing lives. Not about being comfortable and doing the things we always want to do. Then he leans into this relationship with her. Because he knows that she's trying to fill this void in her life with all kinds of things, and he has something to offer. Relationship with God, it's incredible. And then what happens out of that is really cool. Because she turns and goes and just starts inviting her friends and neighbors. It's a simple thing. Because something incredible was offered. This is life change. This community of people that, she's invited into kind of this community of people, this relationship with Jesus, someone that actually cares about me and loves me. And she doesn't know it yet, but the disciples are this whole community of people that care and love. And that's why the early church then, as they started to develop past the disciples and started inviting people in, because it's all based on these relationships of people that cared and loved, and then they pointed each other towards God. And God offered them a radical change in their lives, a relationship with the God who created the world and who knows them. It's unbelievable, something to offer. And so she invited. She said, hey, come, just check this out. Like, it's amazing. It changed. It's like there's something here. It's changing me. It's pulling on my heart. You've got to come and be a part of this. Guys, as we look at this next school year, this as a church, we think about it sort of a program year as the school year. And we think, what's coming this year? And who's God calling us to be? And I want just to remind you, we're called to be a church on mission, not just a church that shows up on Sunday morning. I mean, that's good. Not just a church that loves on each other. That's good. But we're also called to be this church on mission that says, who's not here yet? And how do we go find them? And what would it look like to care for them? It might be some uncomfortable conversations. It might be kind of leaning in and getting to know people that are kind of outside of our box. It might mean shifting over our chair or whatever that looks like. There are a couple things that are happening that are just real practical in the next few weeks. Next week, our Arlington campus goes to 2 services. And that's really fun. Also super uncomfortable, right? We're just messing the whole system up. And that means we got a preaching problem because, usually the preacher of the day drives back and forth. And so we're shifting that. We're using team teaching, and it will be really, really cool. And I'm excited about how that's going to work, but it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. We're doing that because we're making room for those who aren't here yet. I got up to Arlington today, and I couldn't find a parking spot, right? And so we got to make room, and we got to say, hey, who's not here yet? And on this campus, we're starting to lean into some strategies to say, how can we reach the community around us? But I want to tell you, when it all boils down to the actual strategy is this. We have to care about our friends and neighbors, the people that we work with, the people that we come into contact with every day. And we have to be people that are willing to invite, to say, hey, come, join me. Because there's something here. Guys, this is an unbelievable church. You know, you might not know it because it's just your church. You're just part of it. This is a loving and caring church. Like, there aren't a lot of churches like this that just love and care and long to be together and to care for each other and to push each other towards Christ. The hard part of that is like opening that circle up and saying, hey, who's my neighbor that needs to be a part of that? And who's my friend? So next week is a great week to do this. This is a great week to invite a friend or neighbor because as you send kids off into school, there is not a parent out there that doesn't need a little bit of prayer. Some of them, it's a rejoicing prayer. School is, you know, they're going to celebrate. But no, we want those kids to be, I mean, it's a scary thing when you send those kids back off to school, right? You want them to thrive. And these teachers that are heading back into the classroom, you know, our teachers are missionaries, right? They are loving kids every day, and they're having such an impact in their lives, lasting impact. And you know, God uses that. That's a missionary thing. We're going to send our missionaries off. We're going to pray for them next week. You know teachers, and you know administrators, and then you know families that have kids. And every parent wants their kid to be blessed. So bring them next week. Just say, hey, you need to come be part of this. It's not a scary thing. We're going to bring all the kids up here. They'll have their backpacks on. We're going to bless them. We're going to pray over them. We're going to send them off into this school year in a powerful way. Hey, that's going to be fun no matter what. But it's going to be a whole lot more fun if you have a friend with you. Now, I'm worried now if you do invite a friend, because when you do invite a friend, you see church a different way, right? You bring somebody with you that's a friend or a neighbor, and then that's when you're texting me going, hey, Pastor Kaz, like, is this going to be good, or are you going to bore us to death? Like, what's the, you got, I mean, come on, you got good stuff today, or, you know, you want, that's great, man. That's who we're called to be. We're called to lean in. We're called to go and say, hey, we have this message. It's too good to not share. Would you pray with me? God, would you help us to be a church that is on mission? A church that is willing to do uncomfortable things, to become uncomfortable for the sake of those who aren't here yet. God, would you remind us of that? And would you fill us with your Holy Spirit so that we can actually do the mission that you've called us to do? We pray this in your holy name. Amen.